Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the newest episode of Cross Border Talks, where we are going to discuss the new Austrian government, the results of Austrian elections that happened last year, but also what would be the impact of this new Austrian government, a coalition government, a grand coalition, one could say, for the regional and international politics. And last year, just after the elections, we had a talk on the results with Sebastian Schaeffer, head of the Institute for Danube region and Central Europe. And he said then that he didn't expect the new government to be formed soon. He actually predicted a few months delay, and he said that when the government is finally formed, he would be glad to come again to cross-border talks and discuss the new developments. And so, congratulations, Sebastian. What you predicted has come true. Welcome to the program, and I'm happy that you are with us again.
Thank you very much. Although this is not really a good achievement that it took so much time, and I also didn't anticipate that it would be March that I would be returning. But nevertheless, my pleasure, and thank you for the invitation.
So the first question seems obvious. Why so long?
Well, there was first of all after the election a consensus among the parties of the center, as they also branded themselves, that they would not want to go into a coalition government with Herbert Kickl, which is the leader of the Freedom Party, that has won the most votes, but not a majority. And then three of these four parties that are in the Austrian parliament step together and try to negotiate for a new government. That was the conservative Austrian People's Party, the Social Democratic Party, and the liberal Neos. They did talk for quite some time, but then at a certain point, first of all, the Neos said that they cannot see willingness for real reforms in the coalition talks, and they mostly blamed the Social Democratic Party leader Andreas Babler for not wanting to move enough. Left the coalition talks on a Friday, and on Saturday also the Conservative Party decided, and the Social Democrats, that they would not continue the coalition talks, because in theory there would be a narrow majority between the two parties of one seat. And then what happened was that the former Chancellor Karl Nehammer stepped down also as party leader, and his main claim during the electoral campaign with regards to a coalition was that he would not go into a coalition with Herbert Kickl. And now that he has stepped down, the Conservative Party tried to negotiate a coalition agreement with Herbert Kickl. They tried, they stared into this abyss, and ultimately decided that it would be impossible to form a government that has certain principles, like adhering to the European values, adhering to human rights, adhering to actually European law, and even international law. And then these talks also collapsed. So they started to negotiate in the beginning of January. So there was a quite a surprising start to the new year. But then also these talks collapsed, and then the three parties that initially negotiated a coalition agreement tried to form a government, sat down back together, and ultimately reached an agreement. And that the last hurdle was on Sunday, a vote of the members of the Neos, because in their statutes the members decide on joining a government, and they decided with almost 95% that they would join. And since yesterday, Austria finally has a new government in place. And of course, now we hope that the actual work can start.
This is basically what the leader of the NEOS wrote in the social media, that now the work starts. And the president, van der Bellen, when swearing in the new government, also congratulated the three parties for getting out of the comfort zone. But now the question is how they would be able to work together. I know that stopping a far right party is a powerful motivation, especially when you see how in Austria this far right party is steadily advancing with popular support indicators. However, as you mentioned, there were already grave differences of opinion, let's say, between the Social Democratic Party and the EVP. So I can only wonder, will they find a common platform now when they are in the government? Will they be able to connect and or to find some common positions on the key questions such as economy, such as foreign policy as well? Or do you expect there will be some clashes inside the coalition?
I think it's natural that a coalition will also have clashes. I think we have kind of forgotten what parliamentary democracy with a proportional representative electoral system is about. You need to find compromise. And I'm very happy, and you mentioned the Austrian president, Alexander van der Bellen. He actually asked especially these three parties to come to that compromise and remember compromise. And I think this is what they did. And I think at the moment, if you look at it, yesterday there was a press conference in the Austrian state broadcaster, not a press conference, but a meeting of the three heads of the party, talking with journalists on their governmental program. And I've seen something that I think gives ground for being optimistic at the start. The head of the NEOS and the now foreign minister, Beate Meiner-Reisinger, said, when answering a question, it was about neutrality in this case, she said that she is, of course, the head of a party which has a certain program and has a standpoint on the question of neutrality, but at the same time, she is minister of a coalition government with two other parties. And I think this is very important. One of the major reasons that I would observe why the three-party government in Germany, the traffic light coalition as it was called, collapsed, was that here, especially, I would say the Liberal Party, the FDP under Christian Lindner, forgot that they are part of a coalition government, and they started to make an electoral campaign early while still being in government, and this ultimately led to the collapse. So let's hope that this spirit of understanding the different roles that people have in a democratic parliamentary system is something that will also guide this government. Of course, there will be certain areas where there are quite some differences. Neutrality is maybe one aspect, but you mentioned the economy. There will also be other areas, certainly, where we would expect to have different approaches. However, if they adhere to trying to find a solution and trying to find a compromise, then I'm fairly optimistic that this can work. And by the way, the last government between the ÖVP and the Green Party ultimately in the end was perceived as being very much quarreling with each other and working against each other. But I think what they did was bridging these gaps that in certain areas are much bigger than between those three parties that are now in government over 5 years. And I think they handled that pretty well, even if it was maybe not so much perceived by the broader public. So the communication was probably an issue rather than finding this compromise in the last government, and maybe the new government can learn out of this.
As for the FPÖ, and they are of course not happy with the outcome of the events, and Herbert Kickl was heard saying that this is a coalition of losers and that the snap elections should be called as soon as possible. While this is not the case, because we are in a parliamentary democracy, Austria is a parliamentary democracy when a coalition can be formed with the participation of the biggest party, but can be also formed by 3 other parties. There remains a question about the voters of the FPÖ. For with Donald Trump in the White House, there is a favorable political climate for all kinds of far-right sovereignist parties everywhere in the world. Are the Austrians also profiting from this climate? What is the position of the FPÖ party now in the political system? What are their plans for being the opposition? And what are the attitudes of their voters? And is the number of their sympathizers on the rise or not?
So I think, first of all, the Herbert Kickl is very comfortable in the role of opposition leader. And he doesn't have to deal with all the challenges. He can criticize everything. He's a big fan of Donald Trump and his destructive policies, but he also knows that even if he would be now in government, that he couldn't do the same. Because he would have to be in a coalition. So he would also, to a certain extent, have to find a compromise. And I don't think that he is willing to do that. So he will be in a much more comfortable position of opposition leader, being able to criticize this, as you mentioned, what he calls the coalition of the losers. But I mean, it was his party where he was actually also already part of the party that first, so to say, broke with the unwritten rule that the party with the most votes would have to be part of the government, which, as you again rightly mentioned, it's not necessarily the case. You don't have to form a coalition. And they did that actually when the first ÖVP FPÖ coalition was inaugurated in the beginning of the 2000s, which was the case that the FPÖ was actually the second party, the ÖVP was the third party, and nevertheless they formed the government. So in general, I have the feeling that we have some sort of historical amnesia in many cases, not only in Kickl's case, but in general, when we look at the overall political situation and what you mentioned with the rise of far right policies that apparently are appealing to at least a third of the electorate that goes to vote. And here we certainly have to ask ourselves, why is this happening? Why is this apparently so appealing? Because in certain points, I think it has never been easier to stand on one side when it comes to the war in Ukraine, for instance, because I mean there's a clear aggressor, there's a clear breach of international law, and you can have different standpoints on how you would deal with the support of Ukraine, but bullying Ukraine into rolling over and just submitting to an aggressor, this is really something that for me can only be explained that a certain part of the electorate and also of the government elites has historical amnesia, because we've been there, we've done that, it failed horribly, and it cost 50 million lives. And I don't know why we go down a very dangerous path that leads us to this confrontation, and why this is so much appealing to a substantial part of the electorate. But again, maybe the communication has to be better, and also maybe the possibility to discuss how to approach certain challenges. I see that this is a result also out of the pandemic, where there was a problem, and it caused this rift in society, and either you are for measurements to contain it, or you're against measurements of containment, but there is no longer a possibility to find again some sort of compromise between the two fractions. But in order to find a compromise, you need to at least have an acknowledgement of a certain foundation of facts. And here again, this is something where I would say you would have to acknowledge that there is an aggressor. You would have to acknowledge that there is an actual virus, and then you can sit down and say we talk about different approaches, and then maybe we find a compromise to it. And if we fail, we try again. But if you do not understand or have the basic understanding that a virus is there because you say that is fabricated, and someone wants to chip you, and that it was of course necessary for Russia to invade Ukraine because it was staged by the Biden administration, because they wanted Ukraine to join NATO and things like that, then you don't have a basis on where to find compromise and where to discuss. And if you're outside of this, it becomes very, very hard. And I see that the Kickel FPÖ is outside of this common basis that Austria and also European democracies are founded on, and then it's very hard to negotiate and find compromise.
There is much talk right now of Europe, the need for Europe to restructurize, to rethink its approach to security and defense, given Trump's not only statements but also actions on Ukraine, and not only. And the French President Macron is speaking the loudest about forming European army and getting the strategic autonomy concept back from oblivion. And what could be the place for Austria in this new Europe, which is left without American guarantees of security, or is uncertain about how valid are the political alliances that existed yet a few months ago, that seemed very stable yet a few months ago before Trump's rise to power?
I think there's quite some understanding in Austria that alone it's impossible to deal with these kind of challenges, and that for Austria, and I've mentioned already that the issue of neutrality, for Austria, I think it's a very necessary discussion, but also the possibility to have that discussion also within that coalition on a European level. Because if we look at the Article 42.7 in the EU treaties, the mutual defense clause that pays respect to neutral countries such as Austria, I think this is a very good possibility to integrate. We have other neutral states in the EU, Malta, Ireland, where we find a basis, but have again common understanding of a need to work together. And here, the big challenge that I see is not neutrality or Austria. The big challenge that we are facing is located in the neighboring country, or up to two neighboring countries, which is of course Hungary, that doesn't acknowledge that the Russian aggression is a basic threat for each and every one of us living in Europe, and therefore also in the European Union, and that a common approach will be necessary. We will also have to have a European approach to a nuclear deterrent, offering from the side of France to be included, which we to a certain extent already are in this nuclear deterrent, is wonderful. But as we have seen, if governments change, realities can shift nowadays, and things that we have thought to be true and reliable for 80 years are dismantled in the blink of an eye, namely just a couple of weeks. And there will be a presidential election in France where we know that the next president will definitely not be Emmanuel Macron. And if this changes, we find ourselves in the same situation that we are in right now when it comes to, of course, security and defense, but especially nuclear deterrence. And here, I think the only approach can be a common approach. And I think there is a lot of potential in it. And I would have never thought that I would argue for a common investment in European arms production and ramp up and scale up these initiatives, because I fundamentally believed that this is not something that would be necessary anymore after 70 years of peace, at least in the EU member countries. We always forget it's not 70 years of peace for Europe in itself. There have been wars on the European continent even after the European integration started. Western Balkans, violent breakup of former Yugoslavia, also the war in Georgia 2008. We have had wars in Moldova 1992. We have had the ongoing aggression against Ukraine since 2014 at the latest. So nevertheless, I would have never thought that this is something that we truly have to discuss to ramp up also the spending on defense within the European Union. But I think that there is a huge potential to commonly organize and not bring us back to a production scheme that happened maybe until the end of the Cold War. No, I think we need to adapt to new realities on the battlefield. That means that other types of warfare, talking about, of course, drones, but especially hybrid warfare, the use of artificial intelligence and things like that, would be something where we have a possibility now within the European Union, and I would even say within Europe, to have a leap in a development. And this is how we could turn this challenge that the current US administration is enforcing on us into an opportunity. It would be necessary anyways, and now is maybe it's already too late, but if we speed up, we maybe can catch up.
After 5 months, Austria finally has a government which is formed by 3 totally different parties. In my final words for these episodes, I could say this is an ultimate test for a liberal democracy to stop the far-right parties, because we see the archetypical situation, a grand coalition of 3 parties of totally different class backgrounds or of totally different political approaches to key questions, trying to get their forces together, not to allow democracy to be dismantled by a far-right party, which is not a fantastic scenario, but something that some of the parties in the neighborhood of Austria have actually tried to do, and we're doing it with some success. So, Gisei, having said this, it is even more important to follow the Austrian example and to see how liberal democracy in our time can defend herself. And it will be also very interesting. We are living in interesting times, unfortunately, to see how Austria and the entire Europe adapts to the new challenges, new international politics challenges. Sebastian Schaeffer of the Institute of the Danube region and Central Europe was our guest on today's cross-border talks. We hope to see him again with more good news from Austria. And we hope that you enjoyed the talk. And we invite all of you to follow Cross Border Talks on social media, YouTube, and elsewhere, not to miss any of talks and any of our guests. Thank you, Sebastian, for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Margareta. It was a pleasure as always, and I happily return. And I can only echo what you said. I think it's a challenge again to bring together these three different parties, but there is also an opportunity. And let's not forget that there was quite some optimism at the start of the traffic light coalition in Germany, and that they also brought changes resulting from the diversity in this government. Let's just hope that they don't end up like the traffic light coalition. But in any case, I'm happy to be returning. All the best. Thank you very much. Take care and hopefully see you soon.
Thank you everyone for watching and listening to us. Have a good day.